Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it's started. The slide is visible or not?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay. So you know that in the last class we have already finished the excretory, but regarding the cardiovascular system, we still have to discuss some topics. Okay, which will be finished within in 3 to 4 classes we could finish. Okay, we can finish this one. Okay, so today we'll continue with the cardiovascular system. Okay, so the first topic is local control of blood flow tissue needs. Okay, how blood flow is controlled according to the needs of the tissue. Okay, so this is a very important topic. Okay, so you already know, I think this one also, when we talk about cardiovascular system, I think to subject. So first point is tissue cell or to meet their metabolic and functional needs. The meaning of this one is that any tissue or any organ, okay, they can decrease or increase their blood supply intrinsically according to the needs of the tissue, metabolic or functional needs of the tissue. Okay, suppose a tissue is not much in need of blood supply. Okay, there it may decrease the blood flow by vasoconstriction or some other mechanism. Okay, but suppose there is increase in the demand of the blood flow. Okay, for example, during exercise, your skeletal muscle needs large amount of oxygen supply. So in that condition, the blood supply to the skeletal muscle will increase. Okay, so it is possible that even the local tissue, they can do that. They can increase the blood supply of other external factors. Okay. So this is termed as local or intrinsic regulation of the blood flow. Okay, it is termed as local or that means the particular tissue or organ is able to control the blood flow through itself. For local blood flow regulation. Okay, there are so many mechanisms. Some mechanisms originate from within the blood vessel themselves. And these are caused by myogenic and endothelial factors. Okay, that local control of blood flow, it is originating within the blood vessel itself. Okay, that mechanism originate from the blood vessel itself, mechanism from the surrounding tissues. Okay, the surrounding tissues, okay, they involve in the control of the blood flow through a local tissue or organ. So the tissue mechanisms are linked to tissue metabolism or other biochemical pathways. The meaning of this is that these mechanisms, it depends on the tissue metabolism. What is the metabolic level of the tissue or other biochemical. Local regulatory mechanisms act independently of extrinsic control mechanisms such as sympathetic and circulating hormones. So as I told you, these local regulatory mechanisms, they are not dependent on external control mechanisms such as the sympathetic nerve stimulation or even the circulating hormones in the blood. Okay. Therefore, they can be demonstrated in isolated perfused organ having no neural or hormonal influences. That this can be demonstrated in isolated tissue, which is not having any hormonal influence or any neural influence or nervous signal. Okay. ultimately, the balance between local regulatory mechanism and extrinsic factors in vivo determines the vascular tone and therefore the blood flow within the tissue. Now, this is important. Just now I told you that local regulatory mechanisms, they are important to control the blood flow. Okay, they can control it. There should also be some external factors which will ultimately control overall vascular tone of the blood flow within the tissue. Okay, so extrinsic factors, they are also important. Okay, so let us see variations in blood flow in different tissues and organs. This is important. So we have to remember that there are different organs or tissues inside our body. Okay, so the amount of blood flow through a particular tissue or different tissues, you can say they are different. Okay, some will receive high blood supply. Okay, high blood supply means that organ is metabolically very active, you can say. Okay, but some tissue, they may receive very small percentage of the blood. Okay, so let us see here. The first one here is, it is a kidney. The amount of blood received by the two kidneys is around 360 ml per minute per 100 gram tissue. Okay, so every 100 gram tissue of the 360 ml per minute. Okay, so let's see, what about the adrenal gland? Okay, adrenal gland, it is receiving around 300 ml. Okay, and thyroid gland, it is receiving around 160 ml per minute per 100 gram tissue of the thyroid gland. Liver is receiving around 95 ml. Heart is receiving around 70 ml. Brain 50, bronchi 25, muscle 4%. So this is inactive muscle. When it is not anywhere around 3 ml. Skin, it is around 3 ml. So we can see that on the right side there is one table. Okay, percentage of cardiac output, how much they receive is, it is around 14. For example, brain is receiving of blood received by the brain per minute is around 700 ml. But if you calculate by per 100 gram, it is around 50. Okay, so you just can compare other tissues also. Okay, this is important. Okay, how much amount of blood is received by per unit or per gram of the tissue, you can say. So among them, kidney is receiving the highest one, followed by adrenal gland, and least by the skin. So in kidneys, high blood flow is required to perform their functions of cleansing the blood of waste products. So we have already discussed about the filtration of the kidney and all. Okay, so you know very well that when the blood is passing through the kidney, okay, large amount of plasma is filtered into the from the glomerulus into the Bowman's capsule. Okay, so this filtrate is not available for metabolism in the cells of the kidney, but that in very high amount of blood, okay, which is important for filtration so that waste products can be removed from the body. So apart from that, kidney is also receiving a portion of blood which will supply the kidney tissue for their metabolism. Okay, so you have to remember blood supply to the kidney, they are for filtration, not available for metabolism. Okay, and some part of the blood which is going to the kidneys, they are important for metabolism of the cells of the kidney. Okay, now let's see about the muscles also. Inactive muscle, as you know, that means at rest. It is receiving only 4 ml of blood per minute per 100 gram of the muscle tissue. But you know that when there is exercise or there is increase in the, you know that means there will be increase in metabolic activity. So that metabolic activity can increase more than 60-fold and the blood flow as much as 20-fold. Okay, so you know that when you do heavy exercise, okay, the blood supply, which was at rest 4 ml, it may increase up to 80 ml per minute per 100 gram of the muscle. Okay, increased activity means there will be more blood supply. Okay, but when there is decreased activity means the blood supply will decrease. So we can apply this for other organs also. Okay, for example, digestive tract or even the brain, liver, and all. Okay, where they have to do more work. Okay, ultimately blood supply will increase. Now, what is the importance of control of blood flow by local tissues? Okay, the blood flow to each tissue at minimal level that will supply that tissue's requirement, no more, no less. Okay, so this is very important, minimal level. So we all know that the total volume of blood available inside the body is limited. Okay, in adult human being, I told you that it is around 5 liters. So these 5 liters of blood, it has to be circulated again and again throughout the body, so that every part of the tissue, they will receive sufficient amount of blood, so that they can accomplish the metabolic activity or other function. Okay, whatever other function is there. Okay, so blood flow to each tissue usually is regulated at a minimal level that will supply the tissue's requirement. Okay, usually just sufficient to supply tissue requirement. Blood will flow through that tissue or organ, no more, no less. Okay, for instance, in tissues for which the most important requirement is of delivery of oxygen, the blood flow level only slightly more than required to maintain full tissue oxygenation, but no more than this. So usually you have to remember that when there is blood supply to a particular organ, okay, that volume of blood, it is more or less just sufficient to supply that organ, okay, to perform their metabolism. Okay, or it may be slightly more than that required. Okay, we all know that oxygen is transported by blood only. Okay, so here it is, we are just giving one example, that is oxygen. So other nutrients also, same thing. Okay, by controlling local blood flow in such an exact way, the tissue almost never suffer from oxygen nutritional deficiency, and the workload on the earth is kept at a minimum. So these 2 points, they are very important. Okay, by supplying just sufficient amount of blood to a particular tissue of organ, that in that condition, workload on the heart is also kept at a minimal level. Okay, so that is very important. Okay, just to supply nutrients sufficient to the particular tissue, the volume of blood. Okay, so it is just at minimal level, at which will also reduce the workload on the heart. Okay, so mechanism of local blood flow control. Okay, can you hear me or not?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay.
Yes, sir.
It was clear or not, the previous slides?
Sir.
Yeah, the point is that when there is increased metabolism, the tissue, the blood volume demand is also increased. Okay, to maintain the supply of especially the oxygen or other nutrients. Okay, but when the activity of the organ, metabolic activity of organ is low, okay, in that condition, the blood supply is also decreased. Okay, and our main point is that every organ, okay, they receive more or less minimal level of blood volume, which is more or less just sufficient for their function, let's say, okay, metabolism, etc. Okay, so next is mechanism of local blood flow control. Local blood flow control can be divided into two phases. Number one, acute control. Number two, long-term control. Okay, now let's say acute control is achieved by rapid changes in local vasodilation or vasoconstriction of the arterioles, medarterioles, and precapillary sphincter. So we already know about all these arterioles, medarterioles, and precapillary sphincters we have discussed already. Okay, so when acute control is there, okay, there will be rapid changes in these arterioles as well as the sphincters by rapid changes in local vasodilation and vasoconstriction. Okay, so depending upon the tissue need, when there is increased blood supply, okay, suppose this organ is requiring more amount of blood supply, that means there will be vasodilation of arteriole, vasodilation of the medarterioles and precapillary sphincter, so that more blood will flow through this one, and through the capillaries also more blood will flow. Okay, so this is, it depends on the tissue demand for the nutrients. Okay, but when there is low activity of the metabolic activity of this organ is low, in that condition, instead of vasodilation, vasoconstriction of arterioles and medarterioles as well as the sphincter will take place, so that lesser blood will flow through the capillaries. Okay, acute control occurs within seconds to minutes to provide very rapid maintenance of appropriate local tissue blood flow. Okay, so as its name indicates, acute control means it is occurring within a short time. That means it can be within seconds to minutes only. Okay, so there will be, suppose if there is need of more blood supply, sudden vasodilation will take place. But if there is low metabolism in that organ, again, sudden vasoconstriction will take place. Okay. Now let's see what about the long term. That acute control, we have already discussed that. We'll see in more detail also afterwards. What about the long term? Long-term control means slow controlled changes in flow over a period of days, weeks, or even months. So long-term control takes more time. It may take several days or even several weeks or months also. Okay, several months also. Okay. So in general, these long-term changes provide even better control of the flow in proportion to the needs of the tissues. Okay. These changes come about as a result of an increase or decrease in physical sizes and numbers of actual blood vessels supplying the tissues. So you just have this diagram. Okay, suppose there is a long-term need of blood supply to a particular organ. Okay, so there may be generation of new blood vessels known as angiogenesis. Okay, here this is the previous condition. But the tissue is in need of constant higher blood supply. In that condition, more blood vessel will be formed so that more blood can flow through the organ or to that particular organ. Okay, so this is a long-term control. It takes time. Okay, here you see that there will be physical size of the blood vessels, increase in the physical size as well as the number of blood vessels supplying that particular tissue. Okay. Now let's see in more detail now. Acute control. Okay, acute control, it takes place within seconds or few minutes or minutes. Okay, how this is taking place? Okay, an increase in metabolism up to 8 times normal increases the blood flow acutely about 4-fold. Suppose there is sudden increase in the metabolism. For example, you do physical exercise, the skeletal muscle, they will increase their metabolism. Let's say it has increased up to 8 times. Okay. So in that condition, the blood flow will increase to around 4-fold. Okay. So within seconds or minutes. Okay. This will take place. One of the most important metabolic nutrient is the oxygen. We all know that oxygen is necessary in every metabolism. Okay, whenever the availability of oxygen to the tissue decreases, the blood flow through the tissue increases markedly to make up for the decreased amount of oxygen in the blood. Okay, when availability of oxygen decreases, that means when you do physical exercise. Okay, what will happen is that you are consuming large amount of oxygen. Okay, so because of that, your skeletal muscle will require more oxygen. Okay, to maintain normal metabolism. Okay, so ultimately, oxygen is, we all know, transported by the blood. So blood supply should increase to the muscle. Okay, so blood supply to the muscle will increase automatically, so that extra oxygen can reach the skeletal muscle. And at the same time, we all know that what will happen to our body. That means there will be increased rate of respiration. Okay, it may increase the depth of the respiration also, so that more oxygen can enter the lungs. Okay, at the same time, more carbon dioxide should be removed also. Okay, so there are two basic theories for regulation of blood flow. Okay. Two basic theories for the regulation of local blood flow when either the rate of tissue metabolism change or availability of oxygen changes are. These two theories are: number one, vasodilator theory, and number two is oxygen lag theory or nutrient lag theory. So this is in case of acute control of local blood flow. Okay, let us discuss first the vasodilator theory. So according to this theory, the greater the rate of metabolism or the lesser the availability of oxygen or some other nutrients to a tissue, the greater the rate of formation of the vasodilator substances in the tissue cells. What does it mean? I'll repeat again. This theory states that when there is increased rate of metabolism or when there is deficiency of oxygen or other nutrients to a tissue, okay, there will be increase in the formation of the vasodilator substances in the tissue cells. Okay, I'll repeat again. When metabolism rate is increased or oxygen deficiency or other nutrients deficiency is there will be increased formation of vasodilator substances in that tissue. Vasodilator substances, you know, they are the substances which increase the diameter of the blood vessels or which dilate the blood vessels. Is it clear or not, this theory? Okay. So next point. Vasodilator substances are then believed to diffuse through the tissues to the precapillary sphincter, med arterioles, as well as the arterioles. Okay, and they cause dilation, and when there is dilation of the blood vessels, consequently there will be increased blood flow. Is it clear? I repeat once again. When there is increased metabolism, rate of metabolism, and oxygen deficiency, rate of formation of vasodilator substances increases. And these vasodilator substances, they diffuse to the arterial, precapillary sphincter, and med arterioles. And they cause vasodilation, okay, in those blood vessels or the sphincters. And when there is dilation, there will be increased blood flow. So that sufficient amount of blood will be available to, what we say, the demands of the to supply the demand of that particular tissue. Okay, some of the different vasodilator substances that have been suggested are adenosine, carbon dioxide, adenosine phosphate compounds, histamine, potassium ions, and hydrogen ions. Okay, so these are the suggested vasodilator substances, okay, which will cause vasodilation of the blood vessels. Okay, so this diagram you see clearly here. Diagram A. Are read out. This is under normal steady state conditions. Okay, so this is the normal steady state condition. Oxygen, which are purple in color. Here you can see these are the oxygen. Okay, this purple, they are the oxygen. Okay, oxygen is delivered to the tissue by the blood as fast as it is consumed by the cell. Okay, so oxygen will be delivered to the tissue, okay, as fast as it is consumed, okay. And the carbon dioxide, which is in green dots. So these are the carbon dioxide, okay, green dots. Carbon dioxide is removed from the tissue by the blood as fast as it is produced by the cells, okay. So it means that under normal steady state condition, whatever oxygen is available from the capillaries into the interstitial tissue, they will be utilized. Okay. As fast as they are delivered to the tissue, they will be utilized. At the same time, carbon dioxide is also produced by the metabolizing cells, and they will also be removed from the tissue, okay, by the blood as fast as it is produced by the cells. Okay. Now let's see the diagram B. Okay, now this is different now. Okay, it is not a steady state now. So there is increase in metabolic rate. Okay, so the metabolism of these cells, okay, now it has increased. Okay, so it means that here it causes oxygen to be consumed faster than it is delivered. So oxygen is consumed faster than they are delivered from the capillaries. Okay, and at the same time, carbon dioxide to be produced faster than it is removed. Here also we know that more amount of carbon dioxide is produced in the tissue fluid or in the tissue, okay, which is faster than they can be removed by the capillaries. Okay, that means it will lead to decrease in oxygen concentration in the extracellular fluid. We can say in the blood vessels as well as in the interstitial fluid. At the same time, carbon dioxide concentration will accumulate here. So this is undesirable condition now. Okay, undesirable condition. Here in this condition, there is deficiency of oxygen now, but accumulation of carbon dioxide. Okay. Now, in that condition, what will happen is that those vasodilator substances, they will be released. Okay. Now, diagram number C. The decreased oxygen concentration and increased carbon dioxide act on arterial smooth muscle to promote vasodilation. Okay. You already know that all those vasodilator substances, they are reduced and they lead to dilation of arterial, metarterial, and precapillary sphincter. Okay, and then after dilation, okay, after blood vessel dilation, this will promote increased blood flow, which increases oxygen delivery to the cells and carbon dioxide removal from the cells. Okay, now there is increase in the blood supply, so that more oxygen they can enter the cell, or at the same time, more carbon dioxide they can be removed from the surrounding fluid. Okay. Okay. Now the second theory, vasodilator theory, we have finished. Number 2, oxygen lack theory, or we can also say nutrient lack theory. Okay, almost similar only with the previous one. So this is another theory which is not different from that of the previous one. Okay, they just name another theory. Okay, oxygen and other nutrients is required as one of the metabolic nutrients to cause vascular muscle contraction. So we have to remember that oxygen as well as other nutrients. Okay, for example, you already know like calcium and all. Okay, they are required for the contraction of the muscle. Okay, vascular muscle contraction. Therefore, in the absence of adequate oxygen, it is reasonable to believe that the blood vessels simply would relax, okay? Would relax and therefore naturally dilate, okay? So according to this theory, when there is absence or deficiency of oxygen, okay, the muscles of the blood vessel would relax. Whenever there is relaxation of the blood vessel, it means there will be dilation of the blood vessel, okay? So you see that, I'll repeat once again, when excess oxygen is there, okay? When excess oxygen is available, it means it will lead to muscle contraction, okay? When there is contraction of the muscle of the blood vessel, there will be constriction of the blood vessel, okay? So the blood vessel size, they will decrease in size, so that lesser amount of blood they can flow through the blood vessel, okay? But you see that when there is absence or deficiency of oxygen, okay? So oxygen deficiency means the muscle will relax and there will be dilation. Whenever there is dilation, more blood they can flow. That means more oxygen they can be supplied through that particular organ or tissue, okay? Also, increased metabolism in the tissue, increased utilization of oxygen. Theoretically, that could decrease the availability of oxygen to the smooth muscle fibers in the local blood vessels, and this would cause vasodilation. So it is clear that I told you that when there is increased rate of metabolism, more oxygen is utilized, so the deficiency of oxygen is taking place. When oxygen level is low, muscle fiber, they will relax. Relaxation of muscle means there will be dilation of the blood vessels, all those arterioles, metarterioles, as well as the precapillary sphincter, okay? So the precapillary sphincter and metarterioles open and close cyclically several times per minute, with the duration of the open spaces being proportional to the metabolic needs of the tissue for oxygen. So here it is clear that metarterioles and precapillary sphincter, okay, throughout the day, they may close or open, okay? That means relaxation and contraction will always taking place, okay? So the open spaces of this sphincter and metarterioles, it depends upon the metabolic needs of the tissue for oxygen. That means when there is more demand of oxygen, okay, more demand of oxygen, the sphincter and metarterial opening period will be longer, so that more blood they can flow to the tissue, okay? The cyclical opening and closing is called vasomotion. Because smooth muscle requires oxygen to remain contracted, it is assumed that the strength of contraction of the sphincter would increase with an increase in oxygen concentration. So this is very simple. When there is high level of oxygen, okay, all those sphincter as well as metarterioles, okay, they will contract. That means constriction is there, blood vessel is decreased, so that lesser amount of blood they can enter that tissue, okay? So oxygen is sufficient means there is no need of increased blood supply, okay? But after some time, when oxygen is utilized, okay, more again, the oxygen deficiency will be there. In that condition, that vasodilation will take place again by releasing all those vasodilator substances, okay? Consequently, when the oxygen concentration in the tissue rises above a certain level, the capillary and metarterial sphincter presumably would close until the tissue cells consume the excess oxygen. So this is very simple. Just like I've already told you, when there is excess oxygen, those sphincter will be constricted, and even the metarterioles, they will decrease in size, okay? Because oxygen is already high in the tissue, okay? But those oxygen, after some time, they will be utilized, okay? And oxygen level will go down again. In that condition, again, relaxation of the blood vessel will take place again, okay? But when the excess oxygen is gone and the oxygen concentration falls, the sphincter, okay, this is just a repetition. Thus, on the basis of available data, either a vasodilator substance theory or an oxygen lack theory would explain acute blood flow regulation in response to the metabolic needs of the tissue. Probably the truth lies in a combination of the two mechanisms, okay? So it is said that vasodilator substance theory and oxygen lag theory, they complement with each other, okay, to maintain the local blood flow. Okay, that is the acute control. Number 2, long-term blood flow regulation. What about the long-term one? As its name indicates, it takes time, as I already told you. Even after full activation of acute mechanism, the blood flow usually is adjusted only about 3/4 of the way to the exact additional requirement of the tissue. Okay, even after full activation of acute mechanism. Just now we talk about acute mechanism. Okay, so it is doing lots of work, but still then it is not adjusted fully. Okay, that means it has adjusted only 3/4 of the blood supply. Okay, to the exact additional requirements of the tissue. So we can just say that if that tissue is requiring long-term blood supply, increased blood supply, acute control is not sufficient. Okay, so that long-term flow control is also required. Okay, so you already know, over a period of hours, days, and weeks, a long-term type of blood flow regulation develops in addition to the acute control. This long-term regulation gives far more complete control of the blood flow. Long-term regulation of blood flow is especially important when these metabolic demands of the tissue change. Okay, so we know that during pregnancy, let's say, the metabolic demand of the uterus, let's say, it has changed a lot. Okay, in pregnant condition, okay, the uterus, it has grown a lot. Okay, so blood supply is very high because it has to supply blood to the fetus. Okay, it has to supply nutrients to the fetus. Okay, so in this uterus, we all know that during pregnancy, it has grown a lot. Not only the blood vessel, even the tissues of the uterus, it has grown a lot. Okay, thus if a tissue becomes chronically overactive and therefore requires increased quantities of oxygen and other nutrients, the arteries and capillary vessels usually increase both in number and size within a few weeks to match the needs of the tissue. So you already know this one. Angiogenesis will take place. Okay, there will be increase in the number of the blood vessels, and even there may be the size increase may also take place. Okay, the mechanism of long-term local blood flow regulation is principally to change the amount of vascularity of the tissue. It means it has to increase the vascularity of the tissue or the blood supply to that tissue. Okay, for instance, if the metabolism in the tissue is increased for a prolonged period, as I told you, vascularity increases by angiogenesis by producing new blood vessels. Okay, if the metabolism is decreased, okay, vascularity will also be decreased. Thus, there is actual physical reconstruction of the tissue vasculature to meet the needs of the tissue, as I told you, the uterus. Okay, it is a good example. The reconstruction occurs rapidly within days in young animals. Okay, reconstruction of this blood vessel, it can occur rapidly in young animals. Okay, as compared to the all animals. Okay, it also occurs rapidly in new growth tissue such as scar as well as the cancerous tissue. Okay, so this can happen quickly. Okay, so however, it occurs much slower in all and well-established tissue. Okay, so we can say that in older people or elderly people, this angiogenesis, it is occurring slower as compared to the young ones, and it is also, if we focus on the different types of tissue, in well-established tissue, it is also slower. Therefore, the time required for long-term regulation to take place may be only a few days in the neonate, okay, or as long as months in the elderly person. Okay, so to establish the long-term regulation of this blood flow, okay, it may take few days in the young animals. Okay, but in case of elderly person, it may take months also. Okay, furthermore, the final degree of response is much better in younger tissue than in older ones. So this is why, for example, there is fracture, okay, breaking of the bone. Here also healing is very slow in case of the elderly person as compared to young ones, because young ones, they are growing, okay, still growing. So healing is also fast. Okay. Likewise, blood supply can be it can be achieved its optimal level within a shorter time as compared to the old person. Okay. Therefore, in the neonate, the vascularity will adjust to match almost exactly the need of the tissue for blood flow. Okay. In the neonate, okay, young ones, vascularity will adjust to match almost exactly the needs of the tissue for blood flow. Okay. Whenever there is increase in demand of the blood for a particular tissue. So in young ones, okay, after going through all this angiogenesis, okay, the blood flow, the required blood flow, it can be achieved. Okay. Whereas in older tissues, vascularity frequently lags far behind the needs of the tissue. But in all tissue, this is difficult. Okay. It may not exactly meet the required amount of blood flow to that particular organ. Okay. Now next topic is hemostasis. Okay. So hemostasis and homeostasis, don't confuse. Okay. Another term right here. Homeostasis is also there. Okay, so there is a big difference between this one. Okay, when you talk about hemostasis, what is this one? It is a process to prevent and stop bleeding or hemorrhage. Okay, so I think this is already discussed in hematology class. Okay, I think it was taught by Madam already, but we'll discuss also in brief. So we can say hemostasis, it is the first stage of wound healing. Hemostasis occurs when blood is present outside of the body or blood vessels. When blood is coming out of the blood vessels, we can say that, bleeding is taking place. Okay, and then hemostasis will start. That means prevention of the bleeding. It is the innate response for the body to stop bleeding and loss of blood. Okay, during hemostasis, 3 steps occur in a repeat sequence. Okay, to prevent blood flow, there are 3 important steps, stepwise events are there. Number 1, step 1 is vascular spasm. That means contraction of the blood vessel at the injured site or at the cut blood vessel. Okay, the first response as the blood vessels is to constrict. Okay, to allow less blood loss. Okay, you see that vascular spasm take place. Okay, let's say this diagram number 1. There is bleeding here. Okay, cut blood vessel is there, so bleeding is taking place. So the first response to this condition is to constrict the blood vessel, which is known as the vascular spasm. So here, constriction of the blood vessel takes place here. So what is the significance of this vascular spasm? It is to prevent less blood loss. Okay, it may not completely stop the bleeding, but because of this contraction of the muscle here, okay, lesser blood will be lost. What is the step number 2? After this vascular spasm, there will be platelet plaque formation. Okay, diagram number 3. Okay, platelets stick together to form temporary seal to cover the break in the vessel wall. Okay, here platelet plaque formation is here, so that here again this will be it may stop bleeding also. Okay, so in case of throughout our body every day, usually there is small bleeding is always there. So most of the time, this platelet plaque formation is sufficient to stop the bleeding. But in case of severe bleeding like injury, okay, in that condition, platelet plaque, it will not be sufficient, so coagulation should take place also. Okay, so step number 3 is that after platelet plaque formation, coagulation or blood clotting. So coagulation reinforces the platelet plaque with fibrin threads that acts as a molecular glue. Okay, here fibrin formation is there. Okay, fibrinogen is converted into fibrin, and here it will reinforce this platelet plaque, and this will be more stronger to stop the bleeding. So in short, this is the steps in the hemostasis. Okay, let us discuss one by one. Vascular spasm. This is nothing but vasoconstriction of the blood vessel which is injured or which is cut. Okay, vasoconstriction is produced by vascular smooth muscle cells and is the blood vessels response to injury. Okay, vasoconstriction will take place. The smooth muscles are controlled by vascular endothelium, which releases intravascular signal to control the contracting properties. Okay, so it will signal the blood vessel to constrict. When a blood vessel is damaged, there is an immediate reflex initiated by local sympathetic pain receptors, which helps promote vasoconstrictor. Okay, so this is a reflex action which is promoting vasoconstriction by stimulating the local sympathetic pain receptors. The damaged blood vessels will constrict, which reduces the amount of blood flow through the area and limits the amount of blood loss. So it is clear that when there is constriction, lesser blood can flow through this one, so lesser blood will be lost. And at the same time, platelets release cytoplasmic granules, which contain serotonin, adenosine diphosphate, thromboxane A2, all of which increase the effect of vasoconstriction. Okay. So here, platelets, they will also release all these molecules, okay, active molecules, which will increase the degree of vasoconstriction. The spasm response becomes more effective as the amount of damage is increased, okay. If the injury is severe, okay, in that condition, the vasoconstriction will also be stronger, okay. Vascular spasm is much more effective in smaller blood vessels. Okay, so vascular spasm in large blood vessels, it is not that effective. Okay, because to close the wound, it is very difficult by just constriction. But it is effective in smaller blood vessels. Okay, now the second step, platelet plaque formation. After vasoconstriction, I told you that platelets, they adhere to the damaged part of the blood vessel, forming a platelet plaque, okay, which is known as primary hemostasis, and then degranulate. Degranulate means they will release granules, okay. Platelet plaque formation is activated by a glycoprotein, which is known as von Willebrand factor, found in the plasma. When platelets come across the injured endothelium cells, they change shape, release granules, and ultimately become sticky, okay. So you see that when platelets, when they come in contact with the injured area, this injured area, okay, they change their shape and they release the granules, and the platelets, it is becoming sticky, okay. After going through all this change, okay, they become sticky, so they have a tendency to adhere to each other, okay, so that they can plug this hole, okay. So another thing we have to remember is platelets express receptors, some of which are used for adhesion of platelets to the collagen. So collagen fibers of the blood vessels, okay, when they are injured, okay, when the blood vessel is injured, these collagens, they are exposed, okay, and platelets, they have receptors to be attached to the collagen, okay, so that they attach to this collagen, so that will increase the plaque formation, or the strength of the plaque formation will be increased. Okay. When platelets are activated, they express glycoprotein receptors that interact with one another. So another receptor is also there in the platelets. Okay. This receptor is not for the collagen, but this receptor is for the interaction among the platelets themselves. Okay. That means these receptors, okay, they allow the platelets to adhere together and producing aggregation and adhesion. So here in this diagram, you see that this one. Okay, platelets release cytoplasmic granules such as ATP, serotonin, and thromboxane A2. You already know this one. And adenosine diphosphate (ADP) attracts more platelets to the affected area. Okay, so all these molecules earlier we have already discussed in the vascular spasm. Okay, they are important for vasoconstriction. Okay, so another important function of ADH is to attract more platelets to the affected area, and serotonin, it is a vasoconstrictor, thrombecin F through assessing platelet aggregation, vasoconstriction, and degranulation, so that the platelets will become sticky, so that they can adhere to each other. Okay, as more chemicals are released, more platelets stick together and release their chemicals, creating a platelet plug and continuing the process in a positive feedback loop. So positive feedback loop means is that initially lesser amount of platelets, okay, here they adhere together. But because of adhering of a number of platelets, okay, they cause a positive feedback loop. That means they attract more platelets, okay, to adhere to this area, okay, and the increase in that size, again, it will attract more and more platelets to plug this hole. So this is known as a positive feedback loop. Another one is that platelets alone are responsible for stopping the bleeding of unnoticed wear and tear of our skin on a daily basis. So as I told you, we do not know whether we are having some bleeding or not inside our body. Okay, we did not notice it. Okay, we do not notice bleeding is there, but it is always taking place inside our body, especially here you see in the skin. Okay, so platelets plug alone, it is sufficient to stop that bleeding. Okay, small bleeding we can say. Okay, this is referred to as primary hemostasis. Platelet plug formation is primary hemostasis. What about the third step or the last step, clot formation? You know very well, I think this one is there. Once the platelet plug has been formed by the platelets, the clotting factors are activated in a sequence of events known as coagulation cascade. Coagulation process, you know. So you know that in coagulation, the last step is conversion of fibrinogen into fibrin. Okay, so that it will, it will form a meshwork around the platelet plug here. You can see meshwork of this fibrin, it will cover this platelet plug, so that the plug formation, or we can say the sealing process for stopping bleeding, it is stronger. Okay, but as I told you, in so many cases when bleeding is very small, okay, platelet plug is sufficient. Coagulation may not be required. Okay, but in many cases also, again, when there is injury, coagulation formation is very much essential. Okay, thus a fibrin mesh is produced all around the platelet plug to hold it in place. This step is called secondary hemostasis. During this process, some red and white blood cells are trapped in the mesh, which causes the primary hemostasis plug to become harder. The resultant plug is called thrombus or clot. We can say this is, we can say, blood clot or the thrombus. But sometimes this can be harmful. It may cause harmful condition also. It means when it gets lost from this area and flowing inside the blood. Okay, it can be very dangerous. Okay, that is a pathological condition. Okay, so this for today. Tomorrow we'll discuss about coronary circulation. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.